Fort Bragg, 6 a.m. "Hey, Sarge!" Private Jenkins laughed, pointing at her scarred arms. "What happened? Fall off a forklift?" The other recruits erupted in cruel laughter. Staff Sergeant Torres didn't even look up. What they didn't know was that in exactly 1 hour, a 2-star general would walk through that door and say 2 words. "Hello, Reaper." Because some call signs are earned in blood. This moment wasn't just an ordinary soldier mockery scene. This was the beginning of the legendary moment when Staff Sergeant Torres' true identity would be revealed. And you're about to witness this incredible true story. If you love stories of real heroes and their hidden pasts, subscribe to join our War Stories community. Because sometimes the quietest people are the ones carrying the biggest secrets. Have you ever had a moment when you realized you completely misjudged someone? So what happened when that 2-star general walked through the door and said, "Hello, Reaper"? And what exactly did the call sign Reaper mean? Staff Sergeant Torres had been the quietest soldier on base for 3 years running. She worked logistics, filed paperwork, managed supply chains, and went home to an empty apartment off base. No drama, no complaints, no requests for special treatment. As far as Fort Bragg was concerned, she was exactly what her paperwork said, a competent but unremarkable supply specialist with a medical discharge from previous service. But those scars told a different story entirely. The largest one, running from her left elbow to her wrist, came from Kandahar province. Taliban insurgents had fortified a compound holding 3 American journalists. What was supposed to be a simple extraction became a 14-hour siege. Alex had taken shrapnel from an IED while pulling her wounded team leader to safety. The smaller puncture wounds on her right shoulder came from Mosul, a high-value target elimination that went sideways when their intelligence was compromised. Alex had held a rooftop position for 8 hours, taking fire from multiple directions while her team completed the mission below. The burn marks on her left forearm came from Syria, a chemical weapons facility that wasn't supposed to exist. Alex and her team had 90 minutes to collect evidence before the site was bombed into oblivion. The building had caught fire during extraction. 27 operations across 3 years, Bronze Star, Silver Star, 3 Purple Hearts, and a call sign that appeared in classified after-action reports from Afghanistan to Somalia, Reaper. Not because she was the best shot in Delta Force, though she was. Not because she had the highest kill count, though she did. But because when Reaper was on the mission, the target never escaped. Ever. Until the last one. The one that ended everything. "Torres!" Lieutenant Wilson's voice cut through her memories like a blade. "These supplies need to be ready by noon. General Morrison is conducting a surprise inspection." "Roger that, sir. Everything will be ready," Alex replied, her voice carrying none of the urgency that was making everyone else nervous. She had learned long ago that panic was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Look at her," Jenkins whispered to Martinez, thinking he was being subtle. "She doesn't even seem worried, like she deals with generals every day." "Supply clerk mentality," Martinez whispered back. "This stuff doesn't affect them. They've never seen real military action. If only they knew." Alex had briefed generals. She had received mission orders directly from Pentagon officials whose names never appeared in public records. She had sat in rooms where strategies were planned that would never be acknowledged by any government, but that was before. Before the last mission, before the explosion that shattered her left leg and damaged the nerves in her shooting arm, before the medical board determined she was no longer fit for special operations duties. She could have taken medical retirement, full pension, VA benefits, civilian life. Most operators in her condition did exactly that. But Alex wasn't most operators. She chose reclassification instead. Supply Specialist, MOS 92A. A job that required attention to detail, organizational skills, and the ability to work independently. Skills that translated perfectly from her previous life, even if no one realized it. "Private Martinez!" Alex called out, her voice cutting through the depot noise with practiced authority. "Yes, Sergeant? Move these crates to Building B carefully. They contain sensitive equipment." "Sarge, these are just basic supplies. How sensitive could they be?" Alex paused in her work. For just a moment, something cold and calculating flickered in her eyes, the same look that had been the last thing dozens of enemy combatants had ever seen. Every piece of equipment in this depot keeps soldiers alive, Private. Every bolt, every circuit, every component could mean the difference between someone coming home or not. Remember that. Martinez started to make a smart remark, but something in Alex's tone stopped him cold. For a split second, it felt like he was being addressed by someone far more dangerous than a supply sergeant, someone who had seen what happened when equipment failed, someone who had held dying friends in her arms because a radio malfunctioned or a weapon jammed, someone who understood, in ways these young soldiers couldn't imagine, that logistics was life and death. During lunch break, Jenkins and his friends continued their commentary on the mysterious supply sergeant. "There's something weird about Torres," Jenkins said. "Those scars, the way she talks. It's like she's hiding something." "Maybe she had a training accident," suggested Martinez. "Got hurt bad enough to get kicked out of whatever she was doing before." They had no idea how close to the truth they were, and how completely they misunderstood what that truth meant, because Alex was hiding something so classified that her military records had been scrubbed clean and rewritten, something so sensitive that only a handful of people in the Pentagon knew her real service history. The truth was that Alex Torres had been one of the most lethal operators in U.S. Special Forces history. For 3 years, Reaper had been the solution to problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means. High-value targets who had evaded capture, terrorist cells operating in areas where regular military couldn't go. The Taliban had a bounty on Reaper's head, $50,000. They never collected it because they never found out who Reaper really was. Even among Delta Force operators, Reaper was considered special, not just because of combat effectiveness, but because of an almost supernatural ability to read situations and make split-second decisions that kept entire teams alive. The last mission should have been routine. Intelligence had located a chemical weapons facility. The mission was simple: infiltrate, gather evidence, and extract without being detected. But someone had leaked the operation. The explosion that ended Alex's career also killed 2 teammates and wounded 3 others. She had been point person when the IED detonated, taking the full force of the blast. But even with a shattered leg and damaged arm, Alex had continued fighting. She had dragged her wounded teammates to cover and held off enemy forces until backup arrived. The medical board was clear. Nerve damage meant she could no longer meet Delta Force standards. She was offered medical retirement with full honors. But Alex couldn't let go of military service, so she chose reclassification. A new life, and a secret that was buried so deep that even she sometimes forgot who she used to be. That afternoon, something unexpected happened that would set everything in motion. During routine inventory, Alex discovered a shipment discrepancy. 3 crates of radio equipment were missing critical components, encryption modules that were essential for secure communications. For most supply sergeants, this would be a paperwork problem. File a report, request replacements, wait for bureaucracy. But Alex wasn't most supply sergeants. She knelt beside the opened crate, her fingers tracing the empty slots where the modules should have been. The familiar weight of missing equipment triggered something deep in her memory. Kandahar Province, 2018. Operation Silent Thunder. The memory hit her like a physical blow. Her team had been 48 hours into a reconnaissance mission when their communications went dark. Enemy forces had somehow acquired military-grade encryption modules, the exact same type now missing from her depot. Alex remembered the chaos that followed. Without secure communications, her 4-man Delta team had been cut off from command, surrounded by Taliban fighters who seemed to know their every move. The encryption modules they were supposed to be investigating had already been sold to the highest bidder. She remembered Master Sergeant Rodriguez bleeding out in her arms, whispering his daughter's name as enemy fire rained down around them. She remembered the decision that haunted her: leave Rodriguez to die, or risk the entire team trying to save him. She had chosen to fight. For 16 hours, Alex had held that position. Using Rodriguez's body as cover, she had picked off enemy combatants one by one with methodical precision. When rescue finally arrived, they found her still conscious, still fighting, surrounded by the bodies of 23 enemy fighters. Rodriguez hadn't made it, but she had bought enough time for the intelligence they had gathered to prevent the modules from reaching their intended targets. The official report listed it as a successful mission. Alex had never felt successful about it. The coincidence was too perfect, too dangerous. Alex's training kicked in automatically. She began documenting serial numbers, checking shipping manifests, cross-referencing delivery dates. What she found made her blood run cold. The missing modules weren't just random theft. Someone had specifically targeted the most sensitive communications equipment on the base, someone who knew exactly what they were looking for. More importantly, someone who knew that Alex Torres, the quiet supply sergeant, wouldn't just file a routine report about missing equipment. Someone who expected her to investigate. Someone who might be testing whether the woman known as Reaper was truly dead and buried. "Sergeant Torres?" Lieutenant Wilson approached, clipboard in hand. "Everything okay with that shipment?" Alex looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "Just double-checking the manifest, sir. There seem to be some discrepancies." "What kind of discrepancies?" For a moment, Alex considered telling him everything. About the missing encryption modules, about the Kandahar connection, about the fact that this kind of theft could only be an inside job. But operational security ran too deep in her veins. "I'll have a full report ready by tomorrow, sir," she said instead. Wilson nodded and walked away, unaware that he had just witnessed a decorated Special Operations veteran switch from supply clerk back to counterintelligence mode. Alex waited until the depot was empty, then made a secure phone call to a number that didn't officially exist. "This is Reaper," she said quietly when the line connected. "We have a problem." The voice on the other end was one she hadn't heard in 3 years. General Morrison, back when he was still a colonel. "Alex, I thought you were dead? Retired? Just playing supply clerk?" Alex's voice carried a familiar edge. "The encryption modules from the Henderson shipment are missing. Same specs as the ones that compromised Operation Silent Thunder." Silence on the line. Then, "How sure are you?" "Sure enough to break 3 years of silence." "I'll be there tomorrow," Morrison said. "And Alex, stay sharp. If you're right, someone's been watching you longer than you think." The line went dead. Alex sat alone in the empty depot, surrounded by crates and supplies, feeling the familiar weight of operational responsibility settling on her shoulders. She had tried to leave this world behind, tried to be just another quiet veteran doing her job. But some wars never really end, and some soldiers never really get to go home. At exactly 1400 hours, a convoy of black SUVs rolled through the main gate without advance notice. The lead vehicle flew small flags, 2 stars, Major General Morrison. "All personnel to positions," Lieutenant Wilson shouted. "General Morrison for surprise inspection." Alex looked up from her inventory sheets. Morrison. That name triggered something in her memory. The convoy stopped directly in front of the logistics building. General Morrison stepped out, his 2 stars catching the afternoon sunlight. "Where's Building 7? Morrison asked his aide. "Sir, this is the logistics depot. Building 7 is—" "No, I'm looking for this building specifically." The general's eyes swept across the depot, scanning systematically. When his eyes found Alex Torres, they stopped. "Sergeant Torres!" he called out. Alex felt her heart skip a beat. There was no way General Morrison should know her name. "Yes, sir," Alex replied, moving to attention. Morrison approached, and Alex could see recognition in his expression. "I know you," Morrison said. "It's been a long time." Alex's mind raced. Her past was sealed, classified, buried under layers of national security protocols. "Sir, I think there might be some confusion," Alex said carefully. Morrison smiled. "No confusion, Reaper," he said quietly. The call sign hit Alex like a physical blow. Around them, soldiers stopped pretending to work and stared openly. Jenkins and Martinez were frozen in place. Reaper. Why was a 2-star general calling their supply sergeant by some kind of code name? "Sir," Alex said slowly, "those days are behind me." "Are they?" Morrison stepped closer. "Tell me, do you remember Kandahar Province, 2018? The compound where my convoy was ambushed?" The memory hit Alex with startling clarity. Morrison had been a colonel then. His convoy had been hit by a complex ambush. Standard military response would have taken hours to organize, but Delta Force had been in the area. Alex remembered the 8-hour firefight that followed, moving through enemy positions in the dark, eliminating threats one by one, coordinating with the trapped convoy to execute a breakout. Most of all, she remembered Colonel Morrison's face when her team finally reached his position. Disbelief, gratitude, and professional respect. "That was someone else, sir," Alex said quietly. "Someone else?" Morrison reached into his uniform pocket and withdrew a small object, a military challenge coin with the Delta Force insignia. On the other side was a single word, REAPER. "This belonged to someone else too?" Morrison asked. The depot had gone completely silent. Why was their quiet supply sergeant being presented with military insignia they didn't recognize? Jenkins felt like the ground was shifting beneath his feet. Martinez's hands were shaking. "Sir," Alex said, "this information is classified. It shouldn't be discussed in this setting." "You're right," Morrison nodded. "But as of 800 this morning, those classifications have been lifted, and I came here to present you with something that should have been awarded 3 years ago." The general signaled to his aide, who stepped forward carrying a small presentation case. "Staff Sergeant Alex Torres," Morrison announced clearly, "for extraordinary heroism in combat operations, for valor above and beyond the call of duty, and for actions that saved the lives of 12 American service members. I present you with the Bronze Star Medal." The silence that followed Morrison's announcement was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop in the massive logistics depot. Soldiers who had been joking and laughing minutes earlier were now staring in stunned disbelief. Bronze Star Medal. That wasn't given out for filing paperwork or managing supply chains. That was a combat decoration, one of the highest honors for battlefield heroism. Alex accepted the medal case with hands that remained perfectly steady, despite the emotional earthquake happening inside her chest. 3 years of anonymity, 3 years of hiding, 3 years of pretending to be someone she wasn't, all ending in this single moment of recognition. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "I'm authorized to offer you reinstatement to your previous rank and assignment. Master Sergeant Torres, would you consider returning to Special Operations Command?" Master Sergeant. The words hit the assembled soldiers like a thunderbolt. Alex wasn't just a staff sergeant. She had been a Master Sergeant in Special Operations. The rank difference meant years of experience, leadership responsibility, and elite-level expertise. Alex looked down at the medal case, then around at the faces surrounding her. Jenkins, Martinez, Lieutenant Wilson, dozens of other soldiers, all looking at her with expressions ranging from shock to awe to shame. "Sir," she said finally, "I appreciate the offer, but I'd like to remain in my current assignment." "May I ask why?" Morrison looked genuinely surprised. Alex glanced again at the young soldiers around her. Kids, really. 19 and 20 years old, fresh out of basic training, thinking they understood what military service meant. "Because there's still work to do here," she said. "These soldiers need to understand what service really means, and maybe I can teach them something." Jenkins stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment and something that might have been fear. Master Sergeant, Private Jenkins," Alex said calmly. "Come here." Jenkins approached like a man walking to his execution. "Do you see these scars on my arms?" "Yes, ma'am." Alex rolled up her sleeve to reveal the worst of them, a jagged line that ran from her elbow to her wrist, with smaller marks branching off like a river delta. "This scar doesn't remind me of victory," she said quietly. "It reminds me of failure. It reminds me of the people I couldn't save." Jenkins was fighting back tears. This particular scar came from trying to save Sergeant First Class Timothy Rodriguez. He was 22 years old, married. His wife was pregnant with their first child. Alex traced the scar with her finger. "I couldn't save him, but I saved 11 other soldiers that day." The depot was so quiet that every word carried clearly to every corner. Military service isn't about being tough, Private. It's about being willing to sacrifice for something bigger than yourself. It's about protecting the person next to you, even if it costs you everything. Martinez stepped forward, his own face streaked with tears. "Master Sergeant, we're so sorry. We didn't know." "You didn't need to know my history to treat me with respect," Alex said. You should treat every soldier with respect, regardless of their background or their scars or their job assignment. She looked around at all the young faces staring at her. Every person in this uniform has a story. Every scar has a reason. Every quiet person might be carrying experiences you can't imagine. Lieutenant Wilson, who had been standing frozen throughout the entire exchange, finally found his voice. Master Sergeant Torres, on behalf of this unit, I apologize for any— No apologies necessary, Lieutenant, Alex cut him off. But maybe this can be a learning experience for everyone. General Morrison was watching this exchange with obvious approval. This is exactly why you were the best operator in Delta Force, he said. Not because of your combat skills, though those were exceptional, but because you never let success change who you were. You never forgot that the mission was bigger than personal recognition. Over the following weeks, everything changed at Fort Bragg. Word of Alex's true background spread through the base, but not in the way that military gossip usually travels. Instead of exaggeration and embellishment, the story was told with respect and awe. The quiet supply sergeant with scars on her arms was actually a decorated special operations veteran, someone who had served in places that didn't officially exist, on missions that were never publicly acknowledged. Someone who had earned the highest combat decorations and then chosen to continue serving in a support role rather than taking retirement. Jenkins and Martinez became Alex's most devoted students. They arrived early to help with inventory, stayed late to learn about logistics management, and hung on every word when she explained the connection between their supply work and combat effectiveness. Master Sergeant, Jenkins said one day, still struggling with the rank adjustment. Can I ask you something personal? Just Sergeant Torres is fine, Alex replied. And yes, you can ask. Why didn't you ever tell anyone about your background? Alex paused in her work, considering the question. Because the past is the past, she said finally. What matters is what I can do here, now, today. Not what I did 5 years ago. But people were disrespecting you. They didn't understand. People's opinions of me don't change who I am, Jenkins. I know who I am. I know what I've done. I don't need external validation to maintain my sense of self. Martinez joined the conversation. But don't the scars hurt? Physically? Alex looked down at her arms. Every day, she admitted, but they also remind me that I'm alive, that I survived, and that I still have work to do. What kind of work? Training you, Alex said with a slight smile. Making sure you understand that every bolt, every wire, every piece of equipment that goes through this depot could save someone's life downrange. She picked up a radio component from the workbench. This might look like just another piece of electronics to you, but to a soldier in a firefight, this could be the difference between calling for backup and dying alone. The lesson was clear, and it extended far beyond logistics management. In special operations, we had a saying, Alex continued, no one fights alone. Every person in the military, regardless of their job, is part of the same team. The cook who ensures proper nutrition, the mechanic who maintains vehicles, the supply specialist who tracks ammunition, we're all part of the same mission. To win wars? Jenkins asked. To bring everyone home, Alex corrected. Winning is secondary to making sure every soldier has what they need to survive and complete their mission. 3 months after General Morrison's visit, a new group of soldiers arrived at Fort Bragg for their first assignment. Fresh from advanced individual training, eager to prove themselves, full of the confidence that comes from not yet understanding how much they don't know. One of them, Private Collins, spotted Alex working in the depot and immediately sized her up the same way Jenkins and Martinez had months earlier. Look at that supply sergeant, Collins said to his buddy. All those scars. Probably couldn't cut it in real military work. But this time, Jenkins was there to hear it. Hey, Jenkins said, walking over with the kind of confidence that comes from hard-earned knowledge. You see those scars? Yeah, what about them? Those scars belong to someone who saved more lives than you'll probably see in your entire career, Jenkins said firmly. And if you're smart, you'll spend your time here learning from her instead of judging her. Learning what? How to count inventory? Martinez appeared on Jenkins's left shoulder. Learning how to be a real soldier, he said quietly. Learning that service isn't about glory or recognition. It's about doing whatever job needs to be done, wherever you're needed most. Collins looked skeptical. She's just a supply clerk. She's a Master Sergeant with a Bronze Star, 2 Silver Stars, and 3 Purple Hearts, Jenkins said. She saved more American lives than most generals. And she chooses to stay here, doing supply clerk work, because she knows it matters. Collins's expression began to change as the information sank in. But most importantly, Martinez added, she's someone who will teach you that every job in the military matters, every person deserves respect, and the strongest people are often the quietest ones. Alex had been listening to this exchange from across the depot, and she approached the group with her characteristic calm demeanor. "Private Collins," she said, reading his name tape. "Yes, Sergeant." "Welcome to Fort Bragg. Let me show you how our logistics system works. Understanding it might save your life someday." As they walked away, Collins turned back to Jenkins and Martinez. "Is all that true about her background?" "Every word," Jenkins confirmed. "But here's the thing. Even if none of it were true, she'd still deserve your respect, because she's a professional soldier doing her job with dedication and skill." "That's the real lesson," Martinez added. "Judge people by their character and their actions, not by their appearance or their job title." 6 months later, Alex received orders for a new assignment. U.S. Army Special Operations Command wanted her to establish a new logistics training program. The night before she transferred, Jenkins and Martinez organized a gathering in the depot. Soldiers from across the base came to say goodbye to someone who had quietly changed how they thought about service. "Sergeant Torres," Jenkins said, "we wanted to thank you for teaching us what real strength looks like." Alex looked around at the assembled soldiers, young men and women who understood military service better because of their time with her. "You don't need to thank me," she said. "Just remember what you've learned. Every person you meet has a story you don't know. Treat them accordingly." "Will you keep in touch?" Jenkins asked. Alex smiled, one of the few times they had seen her truly smile. "You'll always know where to find me," she said. "I'll be wherever soldiers need someone to make sure they come home safely." As the gathering broke up, Alex stood alone in the depot one last time. 3 years ago, she had arrived as a broken operator trying to find new purpose. She was leaving as a teacher, mentor, and example of what it meant to serve with quiet dignity. The scars on her arms would always be there, but now they served a different purpose, not as reminders of past pain, but as credentials for future service. The logistics depot became known throughout the Army as an effective training environment. Soldiers who served there carried lessons about professionalism, respect, and the interconnected nature of military service. Jenkins was selected for Officer Candidate School. Martinez re-enlisted for Combat Zone assignment. Lieutenant Wilson implemented new training protocols emphasizing respect for all soldiers, regardless of background. General Morrison continued telling the story of the supply sergeant who was a decorated operator. He always ended the same way. The most impressive thing about Torres wasn't what she had done before. It was her willingness to serve wherever needed without recognition. Alex continued to serve, always focused on ensuring American soldiers had what they needed to complete missions and come home safely. Because real heroism isn't about medals or recognition. It's about showing up every day, doing whatever job needs to be done, and never forgetting that every action can save a life. The supply sergeant's secret was a lesson every person in uniform needs to learn. True strength is quiet, real heroes don't seek recognition, and the most important battles are often fought in places no one will ever hear about. Alex Torres understood this. She lived it every day, and she taught an entire generation of soldiers what it really means to serve. This story is dedicated to the thousands of military personnel who serve in support roles around the world. The logistics specialists, mechanics, cooks, medics, and administrators who make combat operations possible. Your service matters. Your sacrifices are real, and your contributions to the mission are just as vital as those of the soldiers who receive all the recognition. Real heroes don't always carry weapons. Sometimes they carry clipboards, or wrenches, or medical supplies, or communication equipment. But they all carry the same commitment to service, the same dedication to their fellow soldiers, and the same willingness to do what